Welcome to a very special episode of TrueNAS Tech Talk. On today's episode, we have another guest for you. Some of you might know him from his video tutorials or maybe from his helpful contribution on the forums. It's Stuart Espey, maybe better known as Captain Stux. Welcome to the show.
Welcome, Stuart.
G'day, guys. Stux from the TrueNAS Forums. How are you doing?
Doing awesome. Glad to be here with you. This is great. Really looking forward to hear about some of your background and all the cool stuff you're doing on TrueNAS these days.
Right. So, you may have seen me on the forums. I've been relatively active. You may have seen some of my videos I've made.
Yeah, so why don't you give us a little bit about your own personal background first? I guess what brought you to TrueNAS?
Well, basically, I started using FreeNAS probably about 10 years ago. I was looking for something that I could use to store a lot of video footage that I was using for a project at the time. And the ZFS underpinnings provided the Bitrot protection that I required for the project. So I started using it then. From there, I began using FreeNAS and then TrueNAS for more and more tasks. And eventually I started getting rid of my EXXI servers and just moving them all onto TrueNAS as well. And from there, I basically use TrueNAS for everything, hypervising, Dockers, virtual machines, and all the storage and network attached storage sharing that I need for both my small software development company and my personal sort of media addiction.
Well, I'd love to go back before we dig into the hypervisor and container stuff, but I guess was it ZFS you were looking for originally, and that's what brought you to FreeNAS? So you were just searching for something with ZFS under the hood?
Yeah, so I think I originally read an article on Ars Technica about ZFS and Cal file systems, and that led me to FreeNAS. And I installed it on a junk PC, and was very impressed with it. So the next thing I did was I built a very big server, 24 hard drive, hot swap bays, all of that. And that machine's still going really well, even though it's about 8 years old now.
Well, that's good. I mean, I like to say there's no kill like overkill. So as soon as you find out you like something, I mean, you jump in with both feet and you say, I'm going to build something that's going to last me a good long time. And hey, it's great to see it when it's still ticking after 8 years. It's not that old in computer time, really.
Right. It's like a hard drive system, though. And these days with NVMe and lots of SSDs, it's really pushing for the PCIe lane. So it's time to build a replacement and sort of downgrade it to being the secondary backup system, I think, before it begins to have some hardware issues. I'd like to look into some of these AMD EPIC systems with 128 lanes. They sound like a very good platform to have a lot of fun with 25, 100 gigabit Ethernet and NVMe drives.
I know we definitely make a lot of use of AMD EPIC in our TrueNAS Enterprise products, but definitely I imagine if you made a build video on that or you tracked that on our own TrueNAS forums, I bet a lot of people would be interested in that chronology for sure.
Yeah, that's another Captain Stux video waiting to happen. I can already see it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's on the list.
So you said that you use TrueNAS kind of as your primary hypervisor. When you said you were replacing ESXi with TrueNAS, that was something. So you were doing that before it was cool. Nowadays, everybody's jumping off because they don't like Broadcom, but you're going, hey, I've been using TrueNAS as a hypervisor for long since before that. And did you start on that still when we were back on like a TrueNAS core environment, or did you only really lean into the hypervisor with the genesis of scale there?
Yeah, I pretty much did it before you guys were doing the bhyve thing. Or you might have been doing it, but it wasn't that big. So I built, it was the all-in-one hyper-converged NAS thing was a trend 8 years ago, I guess. And I built a little Xeon D X10 SDV system in a Node 304 case, 6 hard drives, PCI SSD, 10 gigabit networking, and 8 cores, hyper-threaded. And the idea was that I would have ESXi running on there, booting off a USB and passing a boot drive into FreeNAS. And I also had a pfSense VM, and I had like a Mac OS VM, and I had a Windows VM, and all of these VMs running on it. And it was working quite well. And I had it set up so that there's a build thread on the forum about this. And I had it set up so that I could actually boot into the bare metal TrueNAS or into the virtual TrueNAS by basically just switching the boot devices. And that worked really well. And then eventually TrueNAS evolved, or I think it was FreeNAS at the time, evolved to the point where I could actually put the pfSense VM into the TrueNAS host, and then I could get rid of the ESXi. And by this stage, I wasn't using Mac OS VMs or anything like that. And because of the time machine capability in TrueNAS, it improved. And I came to the realization that I could just skip the ESXi. I wouldn't have 8-thread limits. I wouldn't have to like split my memory between the different virtual machines. I could just have TrueNAS running bare metal. I could have my router VM in the TrueNAS, and I could then spin up as many VMs as I wanted to. And so I did that. So passing through PCI 10 gigabit network interfaces into the router. And then I started using Docker. And so I had an Ubuntu VM with Docker running in it. And this is great. So it's all hypervised, and you know, there's a single machine at home, which is like a data center in a box. It's about the size of 2 shoeboxes. You know, it has 48 terabytes or something of space and all this power. And it was quite lovely. Then, you know, Hill's coming along, and I'm like, when can we switch the scale? Core is, you know, dead on the vine. And so basically, eventually, I took that opportunity to learn Docker and really moved all of my sort of jails and everything into Docker apps in this Ubuntu VM with an NFS sort of loopback share. And then I was able to transition to scale, and the VM came along, and you just change the network interfaces, and it's back up again. And then I was able to set up Jailmaker to install Docker, to move the Dockers out of the VM sort of onto the host. And you get a whole order of magnitude improvement in performance when you do that. It comes back to that getting rid of the virtualization overhead, which is sort of what led to getting rid of ESXi in the first place. Now you're getting rid of the virtual machine, the heavy virtual machine from the Ubuntu VM, and you're running Docker in a container on TrueNAS, and you know that would then led to the videos, right?
Bare metal performance at that point. The only reason I'd want to see a VM running is if it's Windows or something where I absolutely need a different kernel entirely.
Well, that's exactly
hopefully that's few and far between.
Well, that's what I tend to use the virtual machines for these days. Is I run an Apple Silicon laptop, and I just cannot actually do x86 VMs on it efficiently. They're actually emulated, not you know, virtual machines. So now I run those sort of remote VMs on a TrueNAS host, and I just remote control them from my laptop. It's better for battery life, and I can do it from anywhere in the world over a VPN. Anyway, it works quite well, and with the boot environments and the simple updates, I don't have to maintain a Linux OS anymore, or even a Docker jail, right? It's built. Docker's now part of TrueNAS, and why wouldn't you want to just have simple software updates at essentially a click of a button?
I guess I'm going to ask a follow-up on this because I went through the same process, had all my jails, did everything, you know, would spend my Saturday morning, you know, package upgrading and dealing with all the fallout, and oops, I got to build a port now. Been there, done that. And then that initial conversion to Docker, was that very difficult for you, or did you just take kind of off-the-shelf Docker containers that existed and just had to figure out the incantation to spin them up and get the equivalent?
Well, I use Docker Compose. I really didn't like the incantation approach. It's like, well, the next thing you end up doing is writing a notepad full of these incantations. Whereas the Docker Compose, you write the Docker Compose, and you know, once you figure it out, it's not that hard, and you end up with a whole directory of compose files, and you can move those around to different machines, turn them on, turn them off. It's really quite elegant. So it wasn't that hard, but you know, I'm a software developer, so it's software. The real trick is to stop trying to sort of keep notes of how to do stuff and instead codify it into YAML. And then you turn the YAML on, you turn the YAML off, you do the hokey pokey, and you turn your apps around, right?
That's what it's all about, of course.
That's the tension as a software developer between doing something really creative and interesting that scratches the engineering itch versus I'm lazy and I want my weekend. Oh, I've been
Exactly.
there, done that.
And I think we've got a good kind of balance of flexibility now in 2410 because we've got the ability to throw the YAML in there for people who want that deep level of customization, but yet we've got sort of that one-click approach for people who just want to be able to say, I want to go to the App Store, I want to click this button, and I'm going to point it to the right location. So,
and you've also got the Dockage or Portainer apps, which really allow
absolutely
access to that underlying, and the Docker Compose works absolutely perfectly from the shell as well.
Yeah. So obviously this was one of the things that kind of was the genesis of your own videos, was documenting your own process that you went through. Was there anything else that really made you think, like, rather than just doing it yourself and putting it into a write-up on a site, what made you want to like jump into the YouTube creator space to say, I got to record this, I got to put that out? Was it purely making it rich media, or was there something else, gnawing at you saying, I have to do this?
I've got kids that all they do is watch YouTube now. So if you want to talk to them, you put it on YouTube. So I was what stood out to me is I was answering someone's question on the forum, and they were asking questions about jails and Docker. And, I didn't write JailMaker, but I have read the source code. I have used it. I do know what I'm talking about when it comes to JailMaker. And I was saying how to do this. And they were just quoting YouTubers back at me and like giving me links to what they had said. And they were wrong, right? Really wrong. I was getting sick of it. I said, fine, I'll go and make a YouTube and then I'll quote that back at you. So I did. And that was the first video. Was how to set up JailMaker on TrueNAS.
I am a YouTuber now.
Right. I'm a YouTuber. Listen to me. But I actually know what I'm talking about.
You're only getting the 25 to 35 crowd. You need to do TikToks if you want to get the younger folks and use that as authoritative.
Well, considering it, but it's like the short moments, and I am busy, and it takes a lot of effort to make these videos, especially, and it's not just like I sit down and record myself fumbling through the process, actually making sure that you really know, there's not a script, but there is a sort of script, and I've tested it, and I do try to make sort of definitive and absolutely correct content, and it does take a lot of effort, a lot more than just sitting down and recording a TikTok on the toilet.
Oh boy, I can't say I'm ever going to do the podcast from there, Stuart. I'm good. I'm going to commit to that one. I will not do that to anybody.
Chris is a classy guy.
Absolutely.
Where's the other Chris?
Which Chris are we talking about here?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. I guess another question we have for you is like Incus and LXC. Like obviously you jumped into JailMaker. That was just something you were really interested in. Like, hey, this was something that you kind of became the voice of authority. Like you said, you were the YouTuber that got quoted so many times. Was there something that like really twigged your interest on that?
Well, containers, Linux containers is a really elegant thing. Lightweight virtualization, what it really is, as Chris alluded to before. It's about not having to share multiple kernels on the same machine. And so you share the kernel, and it's as if what's running in the container is running almost directly on the host. Now, my goal for my usage of JailMaker was to run Docker, just like my goal with running an Ubuntu VM was to run Docker. Docker is a really elegant way of running what used to be a sort of bare metal server would be dedicated to a specific application, and in this terms we mean a web service really. Now you can run that in a Docker, and what is a Docker? We'll probably get into that later. But my goal was to run Docker, but you can then use the same JailMaker process to basically spin up an Ubuntu or a Debian VM to compile code. It's incredibly flexible, as long as you don't mind the host kernel. So that's primarily why I got into it. Was a sort of end round around the Kubernetes layer, because I really don't like Kubernetes.
So you're obviously a big fan of our switch to Docker in 2410 then.
I think it was the right call.
Yeah, justification for all those hours your team spent on doing that coding and the translation there, Chris.
Well, that's good to hear. And I think we've seen the benefit of that. A lot of people have jumped and are on the newer system and seem to be enjoying it. So that was a good call. Again, hats off to the team that did all the work to make that happen. Last year was fun. I do got to throw one additional thing in though, Stuart, because we're storage focused. For me, the CPU bottlenecks, getting rid of that, that's all great. Network bottlenecks. It's the storage bottleneck for me, the fact that you can run these containers or these Docker images, and you're doing essentially a bind mount on Linux to reach your storage.
Right. Yeah.
That's as native of performance as you can get without running right directly on the host itself.
And
so there's no SMB, no NFS. It's just fast.
I sort of skipped over that, but a lot of the reason why I'm running on the storage, the CPU workload on the storage is, I alluded to before, a lot of what I do is video work, and I'm running the transcoding on the storage. So essentially, I've got a 250 gigabit link or whatever it is between the storage and the CPU work, the transcoding, and that really helps remove any bottlenecks from your network, accessing the content that you're trying to work with using the CPU.
Well, even the virtual network, because I used to have folks say, oh, I'll just run Linux on a bhyve VM. I'm like, yeah, but now to access the storage, you're going over NFS, for example. And it's like, just get rid of the middleman. Even all in the same box, that's still a bottleneck that you'd like to eliminate and get as close to native as possible.
I've found even the memory transfers are a bottleneck.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah. Take all those additional protocol layers out of there, so you're not going, through your guest VM's NFS stack, out through the virtual translation and the mem copy there into our NFS server and then back again. It seems like little tiny things, and for a human's comprehension, they're instantaneous. When you're talking about computers that are measuring in, nanoseconds and billions of cycles, well, that could be an awful long time to wait.
It adds up to, you eventually see the reduced performance. You get into a space where it's like, oh, wow, this would be so much faster native. But no, that's good reason.
Another good thing about doing it in the container is I believe you're not doubling up in your caches. So if you have, your Arc and your caches in your TrueNAS, so to speak, and then you have a virtual machine, it's going to have its own caches inside it. And now you're doubling up the caches inside the one machine. It really doesn't make a lot of sense. When you've got the container, there is no secondary cache. It is using the host disk cache, basically, which is Arc.
Yeah, exactly. You're burning memory trying to do that in your VM, and it's already coming from memory on your host. Again, like you said, you're basically just doing mem copies again, and you might as well take those out if you don't need to.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we're at the point, honestly, where a lot of the bottleneck on the higher end is mem copies. So anything you can do to reduce those, you're better off.
That's basically what NVMe is. It's just mem copy to disk.
Yep, basically. I mean, we've kind of dug into this a little bit already, but we wanted to talk about some of the distinctions, between, containers versus, the Docker apps versus, full-on virtualization. We've kind of tucked into a fair bit more, but maybe we can poke this a little bit further. We got some time to chase this rabbit. I mean, obviously, so you were saying, Stux, that you wanted to get right down and remove as many of those layers of abstraction as possible. And of course, Chris, you pointed out the time where it is viable to use a VM. You need a different kernel, you need a different operating system. And I guess, Stux, you said you have a couple yourself. You're still using some VMs for your remote access, and that's one of the areas where you would want to use that, probably.
Right.
So you use that. What do you use some of your VMs for? Like, are you doing video editing straight off of a VM even?
Well, I'm not, but I do run Windows in some VMs, and then in Windows we might run special Windows only toolchains for devices I can't really talk about, but they run in Visual Studio, for instance, and they only run on Windows, and so we might be using these VMs for continuous integration compilations. We run our own GitLab instance, and that then we'll use these VMs for compiling for special hardware devices or something else. I also use these VMs for running I use VMs for running pre-release versions of TrueNAS, or even just release versions that I then record my videos while using. So the VMs are running, Fangtooth Beta, and I might record a video against Fangtooth Beta using that VM, or even a VM inside that VM if I'm showing how to use VMs for one of my videos. I've tested it 3 levels deep.
So you're going full Inception on us now. That's fine. That's cool.
Yeah. But basically, whenever I need an actual machine with its own hardware devices or virtual hardware devices or a different kernel, Windows or an advanced version of Linux or whatever, I'll use a VM. The containers, the unprivileged containers, I think they work better for exposing web services and that sort of thing to the internet. And I tend to just do that with the Docker. I sort of went way into that Docker thing with Dockerizing all my things so that you benefit from the ephemeral nature of Docker. An Incus jail and a jailmaker jail, they're more persistent. So they're sort of like little pets. You might spin them up and down, but they're pets. You sort of SSH into them, or you don't have to actually SSH, but you configure them up, you apt install things, and you make them into little Linux boxes. Whereas Dockers, you sort of write the thing and you don't really care about the operating system at all, throw it away, grab a new one. The data, that's kept on your TrueNAS host and you bind mount that in. Or you do it through NFS if you've got the Dockers running somewhere else. But you throw away the operating system, the distro that the Docker is running on, and you recreate it. You don't care, or duplicate them. And if they're deprivileged containers, you get the same benefit as Incus. So Incus is really good when what you want to do is have essentially a distro that you can install software on and have it be more persistent. It's great for doing software development in the jail, or for building your own applications. But I always try and Dockerize apps. And I use the term apps to sort of mean these services with a web front end that do something on the back end. And if you can Dockerize them, then you can run them in Incus. You can run them on TrueNAS, and you can run them on any other host too. So
yeah, that's absolutely a valid use point. I was going to say the LXC, the jails, if you will, that's where it makes sense to do that development, where you need to have the flexibility of changing your stack at any time. But, I've gone the other way too, where it's sometimes great to hand roll a Docker image because you just want the ease of upgrading later and you don't want to have to think about it. You want to be able to throw it away and it's a second or two to bring it right back.
If you can share the Docker file with someone, and then it's as if they've got the image, right?
Yep. And we've built a handful that are actually in the App Store that are images we build now, because it's pretty, once you kind of learn the format, it's not that bad. And there may be some things, if you find yourself apt installing, or you used to package install this and go do this specific Nginx config, it might just be easier to Dockerize it. Just take the 30 minutes and sit down and read the format. And once you kind of grok it, it might save you a lot of time in the long run.
And Incus can run Docker files now. So, OCI images. It's not perfect, but it's pretty cool. And it gives you that persistence you may want on top of those images. And there's even a project to add Incus Compose, which sort of is a little bit like Docker Compose, but for Incus. It's quite cool. So Incus is coming along a long way. I find it an interesting thing because, Incus is essentially an orchestrator for LXC and QEMU. And Docker was based on LXC originally, and then they now added a different container runtime. And LXC is what Incus is using. So things sort of come around full circle.
Well, it sounds like there's more things that for us to research into in the future, Chris. Definitely sounds like, Incus Compose, maybe that could be something that's coming up in the future. But on that vein, I guess, Stux, we want to ask you, if resources were no object, tell us some of the top features that you personally would like to see land in TrueNAS for your use cases or for the community, if you want to get on your soapbox for a chance here.
Right. So I think there's sort of different levels of feature requests. You've sort of got the small feature requests which round out your existing features, and you've got the really big sort of moonshot ones, which you know, a couple of years time, maybe it'll be a thing. So little small ones. I would like to see a lot of work go into really polishing the big new features that you have, which is Incus and Docker. You know, the existing NAS functionality is working pretty well with, you know, automatic replications and all that. But the Docker, it's almost perfect. It's missing a few things. You need to get more control of the networking. So at the moment, you've now got the IP binding that I suggested in Fangtooth. And I think that's sort of completely coming by July, I think you said.
June 1st is the plan, but yes.
Good. And the next thing is you need to get the networking in so that we can actually essentially have a window where we can control the Docker networks, you know, add Mac VLAN networks, add physical bridges, that sort of thing. And essentially it's the equivalent of network create and ls and delete in Docker. And then you need to have the ability to select one of those networks or multiple networks in the app configs. That then opens up the whole proxy thing and everything. And that is a major feature which is missing from the Docker side. The other thing you then need on the Docker is you need to have the iXvolume support. It's almost a trap for young players, right? It's like, you just use iXvolume, it's super easy. And now you're really in trouble because you decide later that you want them to be a host mount. You need to have those host mounts. You need to be able to convert an iXvolume to a host mount, right? That's just the button or something. You need to just be able to, it's quite easy on the command line, a bit of a ZFS rename and a bit of this and a bit of that, and it's done, right? I haven't made the documents and nobody knows how to do it, but it can be done. It's quite easy. But those sort of features to round out the Docker support. Another major thing for Docker is to make it so that if you're using Docker or Portainer, you can see all of the Docker stacks that are running. Mm-hmm. If you're using TrueNAS user interface, you can only see the TrueNAS apps. That should show the third-party stacks so that you can see them, you know, as much functionality as that is needed to complete the Docker support. So a bunch of things to complete the Docker support. And then likewise, the Incus support is similar. I was hoping that there would be more of those Docker things in Fangtooth. And, you know, maybe they'll be in Goldeye. I really think that needs to be a priority, is to finish up the Docker support. And then Incus, you've got the same sort of thing. I believe the PCI pass-through support is coming in RC1, but without that, you can't migrate from Electric Eel to Fangtooth, right?
Yeah, that is already merged. I can confirm that's in the internal images we're testing now.
But there's also problems with running Windows VMs. You know, the existing Windows VMs are using AHCI bus images, and that's not actually a feature of Incus. It could be, or we could add it through the QEMU overrides. So it needs to be totally portable from Electric Eel to Fangtooth. But then there's a whole bunch of other features on top of Incus. Just like I mentioned, a whole bunch of quality of life features for Docker that need to be thought about and implemented on the Incus. Then we get to the moonshots, right?
Yep.
I would like to see TrueNAS being sort of the one true hypervisor platform. Why would someone want to use Proxmox when they could use TrueNAS? Why would someone want to use VMware when they could use TrueNAS? It's not there yet, but it could be. It's got the storage worked out. And, you know, part of this then becomes, well, what are you going to do about clusterizing it, scale and scale? You know, maybe clustered ZFS, which is not actually a thing, or there's Ceph, which, you know, perhaps there's performance problems with it, or maybe there's Lenstall, some sort of clustered solution. That's sort of the moonshot for TrueNAS. You know, these are just some things that I've been thinking about.
No, that's a good list of stuff. And absolutely on the Incus side, like being able to select the disk emulation type, that's also coming in RC1. It's a lot of exposing the right knobs in the right places to give people options to go and set those things they're going to need.
Yeah, we had some of our community users find some various creative workarounds for getting the Windows storage drivers in there. I think USB storage was one of the ones they said, you know, this is a good way to slide those drivers in. That was a very
interesting solution, actually.
It's a clever way to do it, because I remember back in the day, it was you could only insert a floppy drive, and now somebody says, well, you can simulate a USB device, attach that in, and presto, there's your storage driver, and it'll work just fine. But for those are big asks for the blue sky features. But I mean, everybody thought RAID Z expansion was impossible, and we've, fast deduplication is coming as well. So we'll say nothing is impossible. It may just take a little while. How about
nothing's
that?
impossible. It's always time and a resource, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's almost like the biggest problem is justifying the time and resource.
Absolutely.
That's absolutely the truth. No, that's interesting though. Now you got me motivated. I think I need to go and make like an SDK image so you can develop TrueNAS on TrueNAS. That would be a great use of an Incus Debian image. Just get the software development kit all installed and laid out and ready to go so you can build TrueNAS and start hacking. I can see that being useful for some of our folks.
That would be useful.
Yeah, an easy to create way for people to do some of their own custom tweaks, tuning, whether it's, as surface level as the web UI and the user experience, or all the way right down in the code. Hey,
I was thinking about it actually, which is you can run Incus in Incus, Incus in a container, and not necessarily even a privileged container, I believe. I was wondering if it would be possible to install, Incus Bleeding Edge on Incus, 603 LTS that you're using right now in Incus, and then use Incus Bleeding Edge features. Not saying from TrueNAS's GUI, so to speak. I'm just saying that'd be pretty cool to have access to those Incus features that aren't available in TrueNAS yet.
Gosh, if only if there was someone who could make videos on crazy things like that and explain how to do it.
Do you know anybody like
I'll
that,
look
Chris?
into it.
Okay.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
I've been diving headfirst into Incus at a really low level. I'm not there yet, but we're all learning together. So.
Well, again, you've inspired me. Now I got to go do some more homework on some things, and we appreciate the feedback because that's what we want to hear from our folks. How do you use TrueNAS? What do you like about it? What needs improvement? That's sometimes more important than the likes because that gives us an idea what we should go, hack on next. So really appreciate that feedback directly, Stuart. Well, hey, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. This has been awesome. We're so glad we were able to sit here with you today and talk about this. And I enjoyed the passion talking about TrueNAS and hypervisors and Incus and Docker. This is all good stuff. I have a feeling there's going to be some follow-up conversations on the forum that happen when this video drops.
Oh, I wonder how many cans of worms I opened.
Oh, yeah. Buckle up.
I think you opened some cans of bees there, too. When you open a can of worms, you can put them back in. I think you've opened some cans of bees here.
Hey, you just got to be able to laugh and enjoy it.
I might give a little plug then to some of my feature requests on the forum. So if you liked some of the things I mentioned about the Docker capabilities, maybe you should go and vote for them in the forums.
Yes, please do. Please do. That's important. And again, we look at those, and that doesn't mean the one with the highest votes wins automatically. It's always a balance of how hard is that versus, some of the other features. But no, that's important because it gives us a general indication of what people really want. So please do go use your votes. You only have a limited number on the forums. Okay, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning into this very special episode of TrueNAS Tech Talk. Make sure you like the video and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Watch us on even more podcast platforms here in the near future, and we'll be seeing you next time.
And go and watch my videos too, Captain Stux on YouTube.
And Captain Stux videos too.
Absolutely.